Blog Talk Radio.
Everybody, and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico. Got a great show for you again this week, another round of Coach's Corner here in just a few moments, and I'll bring the panel out here in just a second. But let me remind everybody, of course, we are live every Thursday night from 6 to 8 p.m. Central Time. That's 7 to 9 for you on the East Coast. Easiest way to get to the show is go to blogtalkradio.com. Up in the search key, type in Golf Talk Live, and that'll bring you to the main page where you can tune in. If you're listening through iTunes, if you go to iTunes, go into the podcast section, type in Golf Talk Live, and you'll be able to get us there as well. And it's also available at Stitcher.com. So blogtalkradio.com is the main site, but you can also pick it up through iTunes or at Stitcher.com. Again, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Again, I'm Ted Odorico, the host of the program. If you want to call in anytime during the live broadcast from 6 to 8 Central, you can do so by calling area code 646-716-4667. Or if you have any questions or comments about the show, you can certainly email me at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. And also for you in the golf business out there, whether you're a teacher professional, coach, or one of the many entrepreneurs out there in the golf industry, if you're interested in coming on the program, you feel you might have something to share with the audience, always have an open door policy here. Again, you can just email me at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com, and I'll try my best to fit you in the schedule here. Also, make sure that you follow on social media. I keep the show updates on Facebook, so go to Golf Talk Live blog. And while you're visiting the page, if you haven't done so already, I appreciate it if you throw a few likes my way. Also, you can follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Ted and Buck, CEO in capital letters. And again, as always, thank you for all of the new followers since last week's show. As I mentioned, we got a great show tonight. Coach's Corner panel coming here in just a second. Later in the broadcast, in roughly about an hour's time, I'm also going to be interviewing Mr. Lynn Blake. He is the founder and director of instruction at Lynn Blake Golf, and he's going to be coming here in about an hour's time. But first, let me bring on the Coach's Corner panel. And tonight we've got Mr. John Hughes. He's been on the program before. He's a PGA Master Professional and also the Secretary of the North Florida PGA Section. Also, a new-time gentleman on the show is Matthew Cook. He's a golf coach for Bishop Gates Golf Academy down in Florida as well. And rounding out the panel is Tim Kramer. He is the president and founder of Spirit Golf LLC. Gentlemen, welcome to Golf Talk Live.
Thank you.
All right, well, thanks, guys. And we'll get right into it. As I mentioned off air, I'm doing a series with Coach's Corner right now called Plan for Success. Last week we started with the mental side of the game, and had some great guys on last week. Mr. Chuck Evans, Gary Okino, and Pete Buchanan joined the panel last week, and we had some great discussion about that. And this week, there's really about 6 components of it, and the last show that I'm going to do in this particular series will sort of wrap everything up with the panel that night, and I'll explain a little bit more as the weeks go on. But tonight we're going to talk about the equipment side of things, and a lot of people have questions, of course, that have submitted into the show about equipment, different issues that they're dealing with their own equipment. And we're going to start off here. David from Salt Lake City, Utah He's a 20 to 25 handicapper, and his questions here is he's looking to get his first set of clubs, and with so many choices out there, he wants to know, how do you go about selecting the right set? John, I'm going to start with you if that's okay. I lied. I said I wasn't going to throw anybody under the bus, but I'm throwing you first. So if you don't mind, John, what are some things that David should be looking at when making his purchase for a first set of clubs?
Well, it's really apropos. I'm going through this right now with a current client that's in for a golf school, and we're looking at a lot of different factors. The very first thing is being able to bridge some distance gaps, and that brings into mind fitting. And as much as a equipment purchase nowadays is such an investment, I highly recommend, it doesn't really matter what skill level you are, is to go get fit by somebody that is knowledgeable with clubs, understands the dynamics of them, and can put you in a set that's going to allow you to maximize your current potential. That potential may change over time, whether it's a stronger shaft or a different lie angle. But in order to be able to have your clubs work for you from the different distances you're going to play, it's really frustrating. I can remember starting out not knowing how far a certain club went, what a certain club should or shouldn't do. And as you go through that first purchase, the way I always tell people, you wouldn't walk into a fine men's shop or a ladies' dress shop and just wear whatever you find that you like out of the store. You're going to get it altered, you're going to get it tailored, and that goes for even a beginner and your very first set of clubs. Let's make sure that these are going to work for you. Eliminate some of the variables that a club may or may not produce within your swing, and from there you can go on and improve yourself. It's a very, very simple thing. It's relatively inexpensive for a fit. A lot of fitters take the fitting charge and apply it to the cost of a club or clubs or sets of clubs. It's absolutely necessary, I think, in my mind. There's too many advancements in technology, too many things going on that would prohibit prohibit's the wrong word, that should motivate, I guess is the best way to say it. Someone if you're going to make this sizable investment, what's another $50 to $100 to make sure that investment works for you?
Yeah, exactly. And Matthew, let me ask you, being the youngest on the panel tonight, there's a lot of choices, as John had just alluded to, and some of the choices are the style of club. For instance, we have more of a traditional blade for your irons that a lot of the better players, the lower handicap players tend to lean towards. And then, of course, you have some of your more forgiving clubs out there. How do you, when you're dealing with some of your customers, you may not necessarily do the fitting yourself, but how do you sort of guide them in that direction at which way they should go?
That's a great question, and I think you both hit the nail on the head in the beginning, where you would seek out a specialist in that area. That's what I do. Even though I possess the qualifications to give the advice, it only takes a short amount of time before I tell somebody about the golf swing, and then about how to practice, and then about what clubs they should use, for them to then not listen to my advice. So I always seek out a specialist in this. But I mean, for me, I do advise with the players that I work with over here and that I did work with over in the UK. Know that it's common knowledge to golf coaches that, you know, the thinner the club, the bladier the club, the more workability, etc., and the more difficult it is to hit. But then again, you know, you see there's this sort of perception with golfers that if they have big clubs, like the meatier clubs, that are more forgiving. Granted, they really are. I mean, such as sweet spots being bigger, and just by looking down on them, they look bigger, so they look easier to hit. So it's a perception thing. And I think a lot of what I'm finding now with the younger golfers is that they look at these big clubs and they think, oh, I must be a bad golfer if I can't use blades. It's the sort of cool look. Mm-hmm. Where really, if they did the research, they'd find that there's a lot of top pros out there using these bigger clubs. So, I mean, sorry to go off tangent there, but to get back to your point, the thinner the club, the more workability, etc., the slightly harder it is to hit. And there is that little bit of extra distance you can get out of them, and the bigger the club, the more forgiving it is. And it would pertain to skill level, I would advise, but then again, I'd be advising on my thoughts and the specialist's thoughts.
Yeah, and that's a great answer, both John and Matthew. And Tim, let me just ask you this, just to maybe expand a little bit further, on that point. A lot of players look at, especially some of the higher handicappers, and they just don't feel that maybe they're good enough to hit some of the blade, irons that are out there.
Right.
Is the looks of the club, is that really important at all? And if so, should they be going out and maybe trying a few different types of clubs to see what sort of not just suits their eye, but how it feels to them as well?
Well, I think Ted, that everybody responds a little bit differently this way. If you take, for example, somebody who is a visual learner, they're going to perceive the clubs a lot differently than somebody who's a feel player. So somebody who's a very visual player may not respond as well to, say, blades or something where the feel is not a little bit more forgiving if they're a higher handicap player. Whereas if you take somebody who's a field player, sometimes it isn't going to matter to them as much how it looks to the eye. And so I do think that finding something that they feel good about is really critical. In listening to John and Matthew, the other thing, and I love the club fitting aspect of it, I tend to work privately mainly with higher level players, as a peak performance coach working with the mind skills. But the one thing that I find invariably, even at the high mini tour levels, kind of before they're working with maybe some of the tour vans and things like that, is the equipment not really matching. It's equipment that fit them 2 or 3 years ago. And
right.
They've made swing changes, and in the making of the swing changes, they never had the clubs refit or reshafted or the shafts checked, the lie angles checked. And even in certain cases, as we know with blades, that the blades will bend a little bit. And they're not getting their equipment checked often enough, in my opinion. And so they're fighting in some ways what they think are bad shots or a bad swing when it really becomes plain and simple an equipment issue. And that may, to me, in my world, may be no more critical than in the arena of putting, whether it's toe balanced or face balanced or offset or things like that. So this is where I really think that a great club fitter can help them to identify equipment that my thing is they need to believe in the equipment. They need to trust in the equipment, and we really need to get that factor totally out of the equation if their games are to improve. And granted, a higher handicap player is going to be able to start perhaps with a little different set of clubs than is the tour player. But nonetheless, they both really have to believe in the equipment, because if they don't and that doubt is creeping in their mind, that's when I see them getting into trouble.
Yeah, and I agree. Great answers, guys. And I agree. Let me just add to this as well. I think one of the most important things that I've always found with working with students is they need to really go out and experiment with what's on the market, what's currently on the market, and not just the drivers. Everybody always wants to gravitate towards the drivers to see how far they can hit it, and what's the latest and greatest out by the manufacturers. But most of your shots are being hit with the irons and of course your putter. So that's important as well. And I think more emphasis put when especially somebody's going out and getting new equipment tends to be more focused on the driver. And I think it's just that sort of male mentality of wanting to, I always say, as John Daly says, grip it and rip it, and that's fine. But that club is only used a certain number of times in most average rounds. So really you need to spend more time focusing on your irons, what irons you're going to get, because that's where you're going to hit most of your shots. And obviously on your putter, you have to be comfortable and has to fit well, and certainly has to be to your liking. Great answers, guys. I want to move on to a specific question here. Stephen from Phoenix, Arizona had written in, talked about, it's really a question about wedges. And he says here, I have a question about wedges. He says, I use a sand and lob wedge from one of the manufacturers that use sort of that extra large groove technology to give their wedges more spin and check. He said, I read somewhere that a lot of professional players will replace their wedges to sort of get a fresh, sharp set of grooves at least once a year. He indicates he plays about 20 rounds a year and practices a few hours a week with his wedges on various types of chip and pitch shots and full swing shots. How do I know when it's time, when it's actually time to replace my favorite club? So obviously his wedges are some of his favorites. How often should somebody be looking at making that change? And Matthew, I'm going to start with you and draw from here or draw from your experience back home, whichever. What sort of direction do you lead somebody?
That's another very interesting but dynamic question as well. In my experience, the players, the majority of players I've worked with, which are the high handicappers, the mid handicappers, the bulk of majority of golf coaches' business. The players that you're working with there, they tend not to generally hit enough shots or to play enough to get new wedges every season. I mean, now in golf academies, now I'm at a golf academy, and some of these students are wanting to turn professional, and they have big aspirations and dreams. They're training 7 days a week. Yeah, then they do change out wedges quite often, but sometimes I think it's a bit of a gimmick. The whole, if I change my wedges, I get more spin, I get more control. When half the kids can't control the ball with spin anyway, so it's a moot point. So I think it's that dynamic. It's down to the individual, and they say there's a lot of information that's been thrown out there in the past that after X amount of rounds you should change your wedges because you don't get as much performance, etc., etc. But if you're playing with a golf club, I remember when I was playing and when I before I turned professional, my grooves, my wedges were absolutely haggard. Literally, there were no grooves left in the things, but I was one of the best short game players in my golf club. Because you learn what you practice, so there is merit to changing your wedges and the whole groove and spin and all that stuff. But for me, it's down to the individual and knowing their tendencies, their characteristics, and where they want to go with it.
I agree. Tim, John, I'm going to go to you, and then Tim will round you out on that as well. John, your thoughts on that when you're working with some of your students, kind of along the same idea as Matthew, that sometimes, especially with these mid to high handicappers, that they're maybe leaning towards the pros a little bit too much, and their tendencies to obviously they have access to some of the best equipment on the market, and certainly have the ability to get a lot of certainly freebies along the way. So for them to change out is not a big deal. But for some of the mid to high handicappers, is it really necessary to change out as often as some of them think?
I wouldn't say it's necessary for them to change out so much as do they have the proper gapping in their wedges to be able to hit the various shots they need to hit. The biggest thing I see through the schools that I teach, the mid to high handicappers that I teach, is they typically come with not enough wedges. They'll have the prototypical pitching wedge that matches the set. They may have a sand wedge in there. They're forgetting about the gap or the lob wedge or the approach wedge, as some companies put it, and the lob wedge, something that will hit it high. As far as replacing them due to use, one of the things, and Matt just hit on it, was that these guys out on tour are using these clubs so often, not only on the golf course, but their practice. If you ever get a chance to go to a tour event, most of these guys are hitting a lot of wedges, whether it's onto a green, pitching, chipping, out of bunkers. So their wear and usage of their equipment is through the roof compared to the average amateur. I'll have a couple of amateurs a year ask, should I replace it? How are my grooves? And I do a really simple thing with them. Take your finger or your thumb and rub it down in two different directions, both north and south and east and west, over where you predominantly hit the ball on the face of the golf club. And if you can feel that it's a little bit rough or maybe it's a little concave from hitting the ball too many times, then, maybe it's time to do that. With the investment cast clubs, they're going to last a lot longer than, say, a forged club. forged clubs with the chrome tends to wear out on them a little bit sooner
right.
with a lot of wear, so you'll actually see that. But I think it has more to do with when we talk about wedges, it's not having enough wedges and then not understanding how each of those wedges can be used when you're short of the green or around the green. I think that's probably the bigger thing that I see throughout most anybody that I teach, even some of the mini tour people that I've taught over the years and the tour professionals I've taught over the years. We're always looking at how to gap the wedges properly so there's not a gap in their distance control.
Yeah, well said. And Tim, I do this sometimes. I want to put a little bit of a different twist on this question for you, just so that we're not sort of repetitive here. But Matthew and John touched on an issue is really not so much changing out because of wear and tear, but I think, in my opinion, and Tim, you may agree with this, I think it's more important learning how to use those wedges properly, not just hitting full shots, but around the green, as both John and Matt had indicated. Do you agree with that? Do you think that maybe money better spent would be to go to a professional and say, look, how do I use this? How do I gap the wedges, as John had pointed out, but also how do I use them properly to get more mileage out of them?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, to me, and because I work with the mind game, I see so many bad habits being developed because they don't really understand what clubs should do, the wedges or really any clubs, and they don't understand trajectories and they don't understand spin rates, and so they're really asking impossible things of their clubs, or I shouldn't say impossible, but very, very, very difficult things for a high handicapper to do with a club. And so, I would say that in that case, that the money would be much better spent with a really good teaching pro who could help them to learn that part of the game, with the equipment, of course, being replaced as it needed to be replaced. The other thing that I see with the higher handicap players is that if you were to look at the faces of their wedges, it's very different than the faces of a wedge of a tour player. Well, you take the wedges of a tour player, and we're talking about about the size of a dime where they hit most of their wedges. Well, you take a higher handicapper, and it's all over the face, and that's not a criticism as much as it is you're just not going to wear the clubs out by hitting it all over the face like that. So I'm a huge advocate of, but I love what John and Matthew had to say in terms of let's get you fit in the beginning, though, because again, if we're not fit properly and the clubs say are a standard line, they need to be upright or flat or whatever, again, you're going to be hitting shots that are going to create a lot of doubt in you when had the clubs been better fit and technique been better learned, and even an understanding of what happens from spin rates and things like that. Those are much more fundamentally important than, say, switching clubs out often.
Yeah, I think a lot of times, and this is typical, obviously, of the mid and particularly of the higher handicap players. If they're not hitting very well their shots, whether it doesn't really matter if it's wedges, but we're talking about wedges here. The first thing they're going to do is they're going to blame the club and say, well, maybe I need to get replaced. The grooves are a little worn or something's not working. And I guarantee every one of us have heard that before. But it's true. I mean, we're being honest here on the show, and people are looking for our advice, and I think that's the thing. I'm all for somebody going out there and making that switch out if need be, but a lot of times it's just through lack of proper technique of using the equipment properly, and a lot of times the club is sort of the bad guy, if you will. And I see people sometimes, every 2-3 years they're changing out their equipment, and I'm saying, why? Why are you doing that? You're not playing any better. You're not doing anything differently. And the same answer is, well, I'm hoping maybe this will give me that extra yardage, or I'm hoping these clubs will do this or do that. And I'm just rolling my eyes, and I'm thinking, yeah, the guy that you just bought them from is happy because he's made a sale, but you're not going to be happy down the road. And this is something that I'm all for, and I'm not trying to, bash the manufacturers or anybody out there for doing their job and selling this equipment. But I think that we have a fiduciary responsibility as professionals in this industry that we need to be honest and say, look, sometimes it's not the equipment. Sometimes it is, but more often than not, it's the person using the equipment that's not executing properly.
Ted, can I add something to that right now?
Sure.
Yeah. I see this a lot, and actually, it's kind of the syndrome that I see of, and of course, in dealing with the mind game and understanding how we perceive things and perceive shots and whatever, I absolutely agree with you that we have a tendency to blame the club. It's kind of what I like to see, and as better golfers, we've all been through this syndrome of where a driver works for a week or two, or a putter works for a week or two, or whatever.
Yeah.
But what I see is that the reason the magic goes away is because we go back to old brain patterns of doubt and criticism and perfectionism,
sure.
and we don't deal with those, and so we're always looking outside of ourselves, the clubs included, as the magic pill, and it just doesn't exist in the club. And by the way, this is not to knock the manufacturers at all. Personally,
sure.
I love new clubs. I think they're fabulous what we're doing with them, and all the technology is helping us more than ever. But you know, until we really deal with some of the negativity at the level of the mind, there's not a club that's going to save us in the world.
Yeah. Exactly. That's a valid point. Speaking of drivers, Tim, thank you very much for that. And actually, our next question is about a driver. We got Doug from San Francisco, California, wrote in. This is what he had to say. And John, I'm going to start with you on this one here. John has a 10.5-degree driver with a stiff shaft. He says, and he's got a real problem here. He hits the ball about 250 yards off the tee. He's about a few years shy of 50. Overall, he's pretty happy, he says. However, he says his drives only get about 3 yards of roll. So he wants to know, should he switch to a lower lofted head to create that more roll? And I thought to myself when I read this question, I thought, Doug, the least of your problems is your driver. If you're getting 250 yards consistently off the tee, you should be a pretty happy person, and I would leave it at that. But
I'm
John,
the youngest on the show.
What's that?
I'm struggling to hit 250 yards, and I'm the youngest on the show, apparently.
I'll take him to a pro-am any day. And be my partner. How old did you say he was, Ted?
He's just shy of 50, so I'm guessing mid to late 40s at least, and he's hitting at about 250, giving him the benefit of the doubt, and he may be accurate. He's probably in good shape, I'm sure, and healthy. But this brings a question, you know. Here he's talking about, you know, he's only getting a few yards. He says 3, but he's probably getting a little more than that, unless he's, you know, able to be Speedy Gonzalez and run out there after his shots and see exactly how much he's getting. But that's here nor there. But John, you know, this is I think something that a lot of players just don't get. If you're hitting that distance on you know, even a semi-regular basis, you're in pretty good shape. I wouldn't change anything.
Absolutely.
Right?
I wouldn't change anything, but here's some variables that people forget about. Are you not getting roll because the fairways are soft? Are you not getting roll because maybe you're hitting in the fairways that are going up the hill? Are you not getting roll because your trajectory is too high? Are you not getting roll because the ball spin has too much backspin on it? There's a lot of variables there that some you have control over and others you don't. A real quick story that really woke my eyes up to roll. Years ago, golf school in Myrtle Beach, and the senior tour, now the Champions Tour, used to hold their tour championship there at 2 marvelous golf courses. And I got to play one of the courses the immediate day after the championship, and my ball rolled forever. I could not believe how far it rolled. And some of the tour people were still there, and I happened to pull them aside and said, wow, I mean, these guys must really like the roll. And I don't remember the exact words or the terms or the numbers, but what they basically said was, you know what, we set up the golf course so these guys can get roll because they don't hit it as far, and they've got to get it down the fairway. And that sort of opened my eyes to not necessarily the Champions Tour so much as the unfairness that we watch on TV and expect out of ourselves, not understanding or regarding that these courses are set up impeccably well for these golfers to get maximum roll. But I'll also go back to the one thing that you do have control over, and it goes back to the first point I made was when you get with a really good fitter you can control trajectory better. And the vision that I want to give everyone tonight is if you have a garden hose in your hand on jet spray and you're trying to get that jet spray, say, down your yard 30 or 40 yard feet so you don't have to walk towards a flower bed, if you keep that jet spray running parallel to the ground, it's not going to go very far. But if you raise your arm up, you're changing the trajectory of the jet spray of the water, and all of a sudden you have this nice little arc, and the water comes down in a nice fashion that actually allows, if it was a ball, to hit and roll. So going to the fitter and doing that is, it behooves everybody to do that. Now, if he really perceives this as a problem, and he does have rock-hard fairways, and he does have all these other things that we've eliminated the variables, the real answer I would give him isn't necessarily the loft. It may be the shaft, because different shafts react and play differently with the different head it may or may not be in. So I'll give you an example. I've got a driver that I've got set at 10.5 degrees loft myself. But by literally changing a shaft out and changing the setting of the driver to, say, 12 degrees, I don't hit it any higher. Depending upon the variables, especially fairway, I may hit it a lot longer simply because it's a harder fairway. So I don't think there's a patent answer to this so much as you have to consider the variables to everything and then realize, hey, do I play a wet golf course all the time? And be willing to tell yourself, wow, 250, almost 50 years old, there's a lot of people that would love to have that problem.
I agree. And, you know, the other thing, too, is I know we don't need to really expand a whole lot on there because, John, you pretty much summed it up. But the other thing, too, that you have to consider is in your setup, you know, especially with some of these modern drivers that have these gargantuan heads on them, you know, everybody's wanting to get that extra distance. So they're teeing the ball as high as it'll go. And which obviously, you know, creates a higher launch angle as well. And then you add that 10.5 degrees on there. So it's almost, you know, I mean, I know this is a bit of a stretch, but it's almost like it's landing like a lob wedge, you know, after it comes down. It's not getting that roll. So the conditions, John, you're right on, certainly add to that. But also, too, I would certainly try this, Doug, if you're tuning in tonight, is I would maybe tee the ball just a little bit lower and see if you can sort of get more of a boring flight, you know, as opposed to sort of getting that extra, because you've already got a 10.5 degree driver anyways, so you're going to get plenty of height. You've obviously, if you're hitting at 250, you're getting you know, plenty of air time. So maybe just tee it down just a little bit and see if you get more of a boring flight and see if that gives you a few extra yards. But John, you hit it right on the head. And unless Tim or Matthew, if you want to add anything to that, but I think that's pretty much covers that. Do you agree?
Yeah, he practically summed it all up there. My answer would be exactly the same, except for people's expectations. What and you know, obviously the golf course, the ground conditions, etc., and control what you can control. Exactly.
Matthew, while you're still fresh in your mind there, we got another question here from Howard out of Illinois, and he's asking, it's another driver question, but he says he's heard some of his associates and friends at the club talk about kick point of the driver shaft. He wants to know what it is, and can you explain and what it does to do, if anything, to help. So he's asking a question about kick point in the driver shaft. What is it? First off, what is the kick point? What is it referring to? And can you explain and what it does that it can help? Does it or does it not help at any point?
I think, well, first, kick points, a point in the shaft. Well, basically, it is what it says right off the bat. It's a point in the shaft that helps the bottom of the shaft kick. So it can help, and it really depends. Again, depends on the player. It's one of those things that at a higher level, then a higher level golfer may experience more gains to it, in my opinion. If you're a beginner or a high handicap golfer, I don't think you're going to see a difference between getting a driver shaft with a different kick point if you can't hit the ball out the middle of the face anyway. So I think it's one of those things that a better golfer, well, I say a better golfer, a golfer that's more consistent in hitting the ball out the middle of the face, yeah, they're going to see they may see a difference with kick points.
Right. Tim, do you think that, obviously different shafts, that kick point could be a little higher in the shaft, some a little bit lower. Is there a way that some of the higher handicappers need to maybe look at the shaft in their driver to make sure that it's not... Go ahead, sorry.
No, please. My take on this would be that we need to make the club for the higher handicappers as forgiving as possible. And so a low kick point shaft is probably going to give them a little softer feel, a little better trajectory in the early stages unless they're ballooning it or something like that. But I just like to see shafts as soft as they can handle. What I see probably with most of the guys at least are especially the young bucks are, well, I think I should have an X-Flex, because they're young and they're strong. And if they're not careful, and particularly with driver shafts and hybrid shafts and whatever, we can get them so strong and with such a high kick point that they start feeling almost like lead pipes. Those, in my opinion, are really reserved for a very select few golfers who have the swing speed to generate, but that's why I think I love the new ball technology, softer balls and the softer shafts, feeling shafts. I just think it gives the beginning player just in a way a better sense and feel. And as long as we're not talking about something that's detrimental, of course, to performance, never want to do something like that. But by and large, just give them something they enjoy, that looks good, that feels good, and makes it an enjoyable experience.
And John, excellent point, Tim. John, this really goes back, I think, to proper club fitting, correct? I think in the long run, right?
Oh, absolutely. When we're talking about a beginner at the very beginning of this program, and a good club fitter is going to understand not only the kick points and the types of shafts and how they're built. A good club fitter does this, as Matt said, they're a specialist. They do this all the time. So they're very knowledgeable to know what shafts do certain things with certain heads. One shaft with one manufacturer's head may perform one way, and you put a different head on it from a different manufacturer, and it performs completely different. A great club fitter they're worth their weight in gold. These guys on tour depend on them. It's absolutely incredible watching these guys on tour Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday practice rounds and how they interface and communicate with the various club manufacturers and the club fitters there to make sure their equipment's tuned precisely. Their livelihood depends upon it. The amateur's livelihood doesn't. However, when you can eliminate some variables that you're not educated about, but you're willing to learn about them, you're willing to eliminate them, now the pressure's on you. It's no longer the arrow, it's the Indian, as we had talked about before, and now you can make, whether it's a time or financial investment / commitment, into making better habits out of your golf swing.
Right.
Bad equipment can cause some flaws. It's not the major contributor. For every driver a buddy of mine buys every 3 months, I tell him, I said, I wish you'd take a third of that and help you out. But yet there's still that feeling out there that whether you're new, old to the game, you're a great player or not so great player, the panacea of new equipment is great. Tim touched on it earlier. I think there's fantastic technology advancements, especially if you've got something that's, say, 5 or 10 years old. It behooves you to put new equipment. But if it's not broken, let's not fix it. Go to a great club fitter. They can tell you whether your equipment's quote-unquote broken or not, so you can at least eliminate that variable.
Yeah, exactly. Matthew, I wanted to. We've got one more question here on the driver, and then we're going to move on to some other areas. But Bishop here, Bishop from Marianna, Florida, which is just a stone's throw away from me. It's another question about the driver, but he's as he indicates here in his question, he's really fighting a slice, and he's obviously been made privy of some of the woods out there that are built with a closed face. His question is, do they really help to fight that slice if he's to purchase one or close the face on the club?
Do you know what? In some cases, the drivers that have been created with a closed club face, yeah, they can. But then a slice, just looking at just by understanding and knowing what causes a slice,
right?
Which is, if we try to simplify it and dumb it down enough so people who don't study the ball flight laws can understand where the club, and I know this is common knowledge to us on here, but the club being open to the path.
Right.
So, I mean, if the golfer's still swinging the club 15 degrees to the left, just because the club face is closed doesn't necessarily mean it's going to fix your slice. In fact, it could in some cases, and I've experienced it. It could make it even worse. So I think, again, it goes right back to the first initial point that we've all made. Seek out that specialist. I mean, I've spent some time with not just the students, but we get the odd older senior golfer from around the neighbourhood coming for a lesson, and I call out straight away. I call out one of the experts that we work with at the academy called Chris Cyrak, and he gets the launch monitor out there, and he tells me straight away, all right, Matt, this guy is swinging 13 degrees left, so he's not really going to benefit too much from you changing the driver, whether it's a shut face or an open face. The problem for this guy is you need to change his path because this is what it's doing. So, and then things you can see them. You can see certain things by eye, but I mean that's why they've developed launch monitors to give you that accurate data to say, look, he's swinging it this far left. That's not the main concern. This is. So in some cases, the driver that's closed, it can help. In a lot of other cases, it doesn't.
Yeah, and I think it goes to a point, Tim, that you've sort of injected here in a lot of the questions is really about the mental side of the game, and I know that you specialize in that, so I'm going to give you an opportunity to approach it from that angle. But I think a lot of times, and I don't want to say that it's gimmicky, but a lot of people buy into the gimmicks out there in the industry. And assume that a 1.5 or 2 degrees closed club face is going to solve their problem. It may help in some cases, but as Matt just pointed out, it really depends on the path that the club is following. So, from a mental side, how do we sort of change the mindset out there with our average golfers? And let's get away from the pros and the low handicappers here. Let's focus on the mid to high handicappers that are sort of under this illusion that if I just, adjust this equipment or adjust that equipment, it's going to solve the problem, when really a lot of it is maybe the path that is being swung or just the approach that the golfer is using.
Yeah, it's a great question, and my take on it would be that there's a lot of what I would call Band-Aid approaches out there, and certainly for a golfer to buy a driver or whatever that's a little bit closed or whatever, it might help them in the short term, but I'm very much in agreement with the other guys in that, let's work on things like, path and position and things like that let's build it around the fundamentals of the swing and get path corrected and things like that, and teach them how to release the club rather than hoping that a little bit shut face is going to save them. The other thing I would agree too is that I've seen it too where somebody with a closed driver face, they slice it worse because it's a bigger diverging angle between they're swinging more left or whatever, and the ball's glancing even more now, and so it's a bigger slice. I just think these are Band-Aid approaches that don't really help us. But to me, it's one of the things that I really like to share with golfers is that the mood and the attitude that we bring to it is that's of course the area that I really specialize in. So that if we're questioning our equipment, that's all okay, but let's get it checked out. Let's not just make assumptions that it is me or that it's the club or whatever. Go to somebody who really knows what they're teaching and doing and have them help you with this, because the mind game in this is just, we all know, it's an incredible, incredible game in terms of the mind game, but we really have to eliminate variables before we start. Most amateurs, high handicap amateurs, again, and this is not a criticism of the golf books and magazines and everything out there, but they'll go buy those and they'll tell them, well, this is what you need. And they'll go get it, and again, it might or might not help them for a very short period of time, but most players, in my opinion, don't have the feedback perception to really know what they're doing. And so they'll think they're doing what the magazine has told them to do, but they really don't have a good sense of it. And the same would be true with equipment, that they don't have enough. So this is why it's so critical to get fit properly. And I think, too, I think that because in some ways higher handicap golfers, the analogy I like to use is that, if we buy a steak, for example, and the steak has a lot of fat on it, well, we trim the fat off and it becomes leaner. That as their swings change and their games change, even in 6 months or a year, it's really, in my opinion, important for them to get fit again. Tour players, their swing is not going to change that much, so their specs are going to be pretty consistent from year to year. But you take an amateur that really begins to change his or her swing, and let's get the equipment checked these guys could tell you better than I could, but let's get that variable out of the equation, because anything, in my opinion, that creates doubt, we're just not dealing with it properly.
Yeah, and that's, I think, really a lot of the problem out there. And again, I'm not trying to say anything against the industry as a whole. I think a lot of the professionals out there, I think, do a fantastic job. But a lot of times, and John, I think you probably agree with it, there's a lot of mass marketing going on sometimes. And certainly I think that a lot of the equipment and a lot of the books out there are certainly very beneficial, but they can also be a little bit vague. I want to wrap two questions in here, and John, I'm going to throw it back to you here in just a second. But the first one here is from Cynthia from Atlanta, Georgia. Her question is very simple: is what is bounce? And she's obviously referring to the bounce of a golf club on her, predominantly her wedges. She's asking what that's about. But then Terry in Virginia also wants to sort of wrap that up, and he says, do course conditions and swing type influence how much bounce I need on wedges? So obviously there's situations where you need more bounce and situations where you need less. So John, first off, let's explain a little bit for the listeners out there, for those that don't know, and a lot of them probably don't, what is it referring to when it says the bounce of a club?
Well, I was telling this story earlier today to my students. You have to go back to the time, I don't remember the year, but Gene Sarazen trying to win his career Grand Slam, trying to win at Carnoustie, and not being a great bunker player, and took lead weights from his fishing tackle box, melted it down, and built up the back trail edge of the golf club to create a bounce. And he ends up winning that tournament, comes over, gets back to the New York Harbor, gets off the steamship, and Wilson makes a lifelong millionaire off the patent of bounce on the golf club. It's a true story, but it's very, very simple. Bounce is an angle that's produced by the club laying on the ground, the trail edge, not the leading edge, is sitting on the ground, and the leading edge is sort of up in the air a little bit, and that angle is what's called bounce angle. It works very similarly to a snowplow. When a snowplow is going down the road, you just can't take that leading edge and dig into the pavement to get all the ice and snow off. You'd have major tax problems with your home and cars trying to replace roads all the time that way. So the snowplow is actually built to get most everything off except a small little layer, and your sand wedge and your wedges work the same way. Yes, there are conditions, in my opinion, and I think the other two guys, Tim and Matt, would agree that when you're playing out of softer conditions, whether it's grass or sand, you're going to want a little bit more bounce, because that bounce keeps the club in the condition longer, allows the face of the club to strike the ball in a more square position, where when you have harder conditions, you're probably going to have less bounce angles. So when you're looking at wedges that are the really good wedges that are built these days, and even the wedges that are part of a set, they'll give you two numbers like 56.8 or 64. and that second number is your bounce angle. And there's different ways of grinding the bounce based on your swing.
Right.
Again, I get back to a really good club fitter is going to have you better understand what kind of bounce you should have. The more vertical your swing, if you get a lot of bounce in there, it's going to do just that. You're going to bounce. So you've got to balance all that out. The not so good player, the average amateur is what I call them. If you can set up your wedges where one has a lot of bounce, preferably your sand wedge, your lob wedge, your gap wedge has something in between, and your pitching wedge has the least amount of bounce, it's probably a really good set makeup as well as loft angles to complement those bounce angles.
Yeah, and Matthew, obviously, I want to get you to jump in on this as well, because obviously I know through your academy, through the academy, you see a lot of different players and that. But how do you? I mean, obviously you have different, as John just alluded to. You have your pitching wedge and your sand wedge and a lob wedge that obviously have various bounce on it. What do you do? There's two situations here, really. Obviously, somebody that's playing your average club golfer that's maybe playing the same course all the time probably doesn't need to change up too much once he's got his wedges sort of in play. But what about the players that maybe travel a little bit more and play a variety of different courses? Are they going to get caught in a situation, do you think, where maybe their clubs are not going to work or maybe going to work very well in this type of course, but maybe somewhere else it's not going to be as effective because, as John alluded to, the sand's a little firmer at this course. So how do they compensate, or can they?
You know what? That's a great point. And with the students at our academy, they do play a lot of tournaments. You know, they do travel around, and I've experienced both the golfers that just play it on a Saturday and a Sunday and through the week at the same golf club, who can buy a set of wedges and, you know, they're good for that golf course because that's all they're going to play, so you can get them pretty much set.
Right.
But then for these golfers now in academies, and certainly the more I coach and the more I'm involved in golf, the better players I start to work with who are traveling all over. They do own multiple wedges with different bounce angles, with different lofts, etc., etc. And you know, for me, it's if you're dealing with players that are playing tournaments all over the country and they're playing different golf courses, then no doubt they're going to be playing a practice round, or they're going to have some indication as to what the golf course is like. And they're going to do the research. If they're being educated, they're going to do the research onto what the conditions may be like. So they'll take different clubs and they'll have different bounce angles. But the one thing they will know how to do, which runs consistent throughout, is what they're trying to do with that particular wedge. And depending on that player's characteristics, that player's style of pitching, you know, the age-old hit down on it, hands ahead, weight left, hit down on it, you know, it's not quite the case anymore. The theme now is, you know, release it a little earlier, shallow it out, and, you know, take cleaner divots. Whether who's right and wrong is nowhere to say, because each one's been successful. But it's the fact that those players know what they're doing. They know that they know what they're trying to achieve. They know their own characteristics, and for me, it's difficult to own multiple wedges. But if you can, I would. And if you can't, then you have to know your own tendencies, your own characteristics when trying to hit a pitch shot. Right,
and exactly, a very great point. Tim, I'm going to, excuse me, pardon me, I want to approach this a little bit differently. You know, again, I don't want to be too repetitive, but let's take a situation where less bounce is needed, obviously, but where a lot of amateurs really struggle, I think. Obviously, some of them struggle in the bunker, but a lot of times it's from a very tightly mown fairway. They need to, they're, you know, maybe just a few yards to the green. They need to hit that shot, and they don't understand how the bounce works. And a lot of times you see it's the pros obviously know what they're doing, but a lot of the amateurs don't. And a lot of times they'll use a club that's maybe got too much bounce, and of course that trailing edge hits the ground in that nicely mown fairway and ends up skipping and blading the ball. So suddenly a lot of confidence is lost. So how do you work with some of the students that you're working through to help them understand and get through that anxiety?
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a great question, and I've seen players certainly that switch wedges and with different amounts of bounce based upon course conditions. But I have to say that most of my players and several on the tour, PGA Tour and LPGA Tour, and even the Web.com Tour, they're so good with the wedges that they've got that because they understand bounce. And I guess I got to get back again to the information factor. Go to a pro that can really teach you how to hit with bounce. And so it's not to suggest that a club with a lot of bounce is going to be easy to hit off of a really tight lie or anything like that. It's not saying that, but I think that with a better understanding of bounce, of how to hit chip and pitch around the green using bounce or using leading edges and things like that, those are the things that really take a lot of the clubs. Because by and large, most of the wedges that I see with the average amateur or whatever have an acceptable amount of bounce. It may not be the perfect amount of bounce, but it's enough that they could, if they understood the dynamics of bounce, they could make the adjustments and become better players with the clubs that they've already got. And again, we get into that thing of, if I just had the right club, then my game's going to improve, my short game's going to improve. And I would suggest now, without a really clear understanding of how bounce works, and even in terms of bounce, in terms of loft and spin rate and how far it rolls out and things like that, those are maybe, in my opinion, for the average player, would be very helpful to understand from the bounce standpoint. So that, club selection or club bounce is very important, but an understanding of bounce goes light years beyond that. Yeah, exactly. Well, guys, I hate to say this, but we're actually out of time. That's probably the fastest hour I think I've had in Coach's Corner since doing it last year, and as I promised, guys, I wanted to give you each a moment or two just to let everybody know how they can get a hold of you, including any of the participants. We had a few more questions here, but unfortunately I don't have time to get through them, so we'll have to save it for another one. I'm going to, Matthew, you being the youngest on the panel here, I'm going to let you go first. Just let the folks out there know a little bit about where they can get a hold of you if they're interested in looking into the academy and or if they're interested in maybe working with you directly.
Yeah, by all means. My direct line is 404-936-7504. My email is matthewc@bgga.com. If you just go to the Bishopsgate website, you'll find me there and details there.
What's the website link, Matthew?
Bishopsgate Golf Academy.
Bishopgates.com?
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Tim?
Yes. Well, you can reach me. Go ahead, Ted, please.
No, that was you. Sorry.
Oh,
that
okay,
was me.
Okay. No, I'm sorry. I can be reached. And again, I tend to, I do clinics all over the country, and I do them a lot of the private clubs. And one thing that I would like to suggest as we work on the mind skills is that we have a presentation to go over the mind stuff, but then we actually assimilate the skills on the practice range, which is just invaluable, how to work this emotional component into swing technique. So it's very valuable. Excuse me. I can be reached directly at 772-879-1978, and my website, Spirit of Golf, is actually myspiritofgolf.com, and my email directly would be tim@myspiritofgolf.com.
Perfect. And lastly, if certainly not least, Mr. Hughes.
Well, I'm located in Orlando, but I do travel the country where my clients want me to go. Easiest way to find me is my website, johnhughesgolf.com, and John Hughes Golf is my handle for Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I'm constantly updating things there. One of the things I want to plug is I've got a trip planned for the entire peninsula of Scotland, the week between the two Open Championships, men's and women's, and that's going to be closing up here soon. You can get more information about that join me and a couple of friends in Scotland this summer. It'll be a lot of fantastic fun and excitement. Learn a whole lot about you and your golf game and meet some new friends. Again, JohnHughesGolf.com is where you can find that. And Ted, once again, thanks for the honor and thanks for the pleasure of assisting you and the listeners to Golf Talk Live.
Well, thank you very much to all of you. I always have a lot of fun. And John, you know this from being on past shows and from listening in and that. I enjoy doing this. I think it's a great honor to be able to bring some other pros like yourselves on here and talk about it and share it with the audience. I think it's something that we're going to keep continuing to grow, and the program's growing and circulating all over the world every week, and I feel very honored and privileged to have a great group of guys as you three. And just on a special note, John, I know you'll be coming back many more times, and I think, Matthew, you've signed up for a few more, and Tim, if you haven't, by all means. But Matthew and Tim, I'm going to have you on separately for an interview for each of you to come on and talk a little bit more in depth about what you do. But I'm glad you came in and got your feet wet tonight on Coach's Corner. Thanks, guys, for helping out.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. It was wonderful.
Thank you, Ted. It's been a pleasure. It's always exciting sharing best practices and sharing ideas with like-minded people.
Well, I appreciate it. And Tim, thank you as well, and Matthew. And guys, have a great weekend and much happy golfing. And let's see if we can get out there and help as many people as possible enjoy this great game.
Beautiful.
Indeed,
Thanks
let's
again,
grow
Ted.
it.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ted.
Thanks, Ted.
All right.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Okay, that was three great guys on the program. John Hughes, PGA Master Professional. Tim Kramer, President and Founder of Spirit of Golf, LLC. And lastly, rounding out the panel is Matthew Cook, golf coach down at Bishop Gates Golf Academy in about South Central Florida, I believe that is. Great guys to have on the panel tonight. Lots of, unfortunately, we couldn't get to all of the questions, but had a great time and always enjoy having some new people come on the show as well and share their input with the audience. But now it's time to bring on another gentleman. I see that he's here, and I'm going to introduce him here, and I'm going to bring him on as quickly as possible, and we'll talk a little bit more when he gets on here. But my very special guest tonight is Mr. Lynn Blake. He's the founder and director of instruction at Lynn Blake Golf. A great guy. I've had the pleasure of talking to him off the air, but I'm going to talk to him on the air now. We'll talk a little bit about what it is that he does and how he helps not only the students out there, but some great teacher professionals as well. Good evening, Lynn, and welcome to Golf Talk Live.
Hello, Ted. How are you tonight?
I'm doing very well. Honor and pleasure to have you on the show, and I know we've talked off air, as I just mentioned before. And I want to mention a few accolades.
The last time sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but the last time I was sitting on a balcony outside my room in sunny Orlando, Florida during the PGA show, overlooking a swimming pool with swaying palms. It was a delightful conversation.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we can't get into all the details of the conversation because some of it was a little bit private, but we'll share that another time perhaps. But, Lynn, let me just say a few things first here. I wanted to bring you on because I know you've been patiently waiting, listening in for the last little while here, and I wanted to bring you on air before I said any more. But let me just share with the folks just some of the great things that you've done. Lynn, you've obviously had a fabulous teaching career, but you do some other things. We're going to talk about that. But you've some of the results that you've gotten have been very impressive. You've got 3 PGA Tour champions, 5 nationwide Tour champions, 3 PGA Section champions, 4 PGA Section Players of the Year, 2 PGA Section Teachers of the Year, 2 State Open champions, and 2 2009 Q School qualifiers, 4 2011. Feel free to stop me if you need to. 2011 PGA Professional National Championship.
It proves one thing. One of the great challenges, if you will, and skills, if you will, of the teaching profession is the ability to choose your students.
Yeah.
I like to say I give fish swimming lessons.
You've done a fabulous job. You've got some great highlights in your career. But I want to also talk about something that when I was doing some of the research here, you've been obviously playing golf and teaching golf and helping so many others. And it's not just, as I said, it's not just students out there. You work with a lot of teaching professionals as well in the game.
Yes.
And we'll talk more about that here in just a moment. But you've been really, I guess, you studied something here that was kind of caught my eye. The study of the golfing machine, and it was one of the really fortunate opportunities in your career that you got to work with the author of that, Mr. Homer Kelly. Unfortunately, is no longer with us, but and it was really that relationship that developed a little further in your career. Tell us about that relationship. Well, actually, let me back up just before you do that. Just explain to the listeners, if you will, out there, Lynn, who sort of introduced you to golf.
Well, before I forget it, and that's always that's always a challenge as you reach the late 60s, which I am, 68. I'm 4 under, but not under, if you get my drift. Anyway, all my study with Mr. Kelly and association early on with the golfing machine was pre-career. I wasn't in the business, but the association later on led to the business. Part-time at 2 to 3 years, and then I quit for 20 years in true Rip Van Winkle style for a variety of reasons, and then came back in 2004. So I came in 82, if you will, to the teaching career, out in 84, back in 2004, and I hadn't put it down since. So I wanted to get that out on the table first. Now, you asked, how did I get started in golf?
Yeah.
I played Little League baseball. My dad was a military officer, and we lived in Germany. And he would go out to play golf. He wasn't a good player and didn't play all that much, but I knew that golf took a long time to play because when he went out, he didn't come back until nighttime. We were in Germany, and of course there weren't courses anywhere nearby. I have no idea where he played, but he would come in and would be late. And I used to love digging in his bag, with all those golf balls. They were nice and sticky coming out of the sleeves, and he had all these multicolored tees, and I'd bring them in and bring them up by the fist, reach down and bring them up by the fistful. Of course, he was left-handed, and as he used to say, only left-handed people are in their right mind. So I pulled my mom's Patty Burke 3-wood out and walked into the backyard, never having hit a golf ball, and I have no idea if I hit it the first swing, probably didn't. But that one I caught, wow, golf balls went a lot further than baseballs. And that's where my love affair with the game began. I didn't pick up a club again until I was, 14 years old. We had moved back to the States, and I started the freshman golf team, having never played, really, there at Spraberry High School. And my mom would take me out to O.B. Keeler Golf Course, which is now Pine Tree Country Club. At that time, it was a public course. And I would be led into the caddy pen, which was a chicken wire fence strung around 4 pines, and I would stay there until my name was called. She would drop me off at dark. That'd be 5:30 or 6 in the morning, and I'd get my bag to go out in the morning and oftentimes in the afternoon, too. It's too little to carry double. And that's how I bought my first set of Gene Littler Spalding Top Flight irons, and boy, was I proud of those puppies. Unfortunately,
I remember
Georgia
those.
Red Clay, Georgia Red Clay, the red clay of Terra, said Scarlett O'Hara, was filled with rocks. This was kind of a new course, and I bet you I uncovered about half the rocks on that 18 holes with my new Spalding Top Flights. But anyway, that's where it started.
Wow. Yeah, I remember those irons very well. That brings back some memories. Now, you mentioned, Lynn, back in the 80s, you sort of hit a wall of sorts, if you will, while you were studying the golf machine, again, authored by the late Homer Kelly. You reached out to that author, and first off, why, and sort of what just transpired between you and Homer?
Well, it started in 1979 when Bobby Clampett was one of the best amateurs in the world and could beat most of the professionals. People forget just how good Bobby Clampett was. And an article appeared in Golf World about him and about his teacher, Ben Doyle, out in Carmel, California, and about this book called The Golfing Machine, which, of course, I'd never heard of, and few people had. It had been published in 1969, but here we were in 1979, 10 years later. It was still unknown. And I read these words like lag and drag and accumulator and thrust. And, I had every golf book known to man. My library already, because I was a searcher, was pretty full. but I had never heard anything like that. Anyway, I got a hold of the book and started studying. That was summer of '79. And I'll never forget, I was I had a place to study in my bedroom, and it just hit me. I don't understand a word this man's saying. It was a whole new language. I mean, he would talk about the role of the number 3 accumulator and the path of the hands-down plane, and then, man, what is all this stuff about? And I gradually dug out most of it, or a lot of it anyway, enough to know, it's kind of like the guy in karate, if he's got his black belt, he knows just enough to get killed in a street fight. And that's kind of where I was then. But I hit hinge action. And hinge action is unlike, it's not what you think, because typically we think of hinge action in golf as being the cocking and uncocking of the left wrist. Well, it wasn't that at all. And I couldn't understand it. The illustration is this, it was a woman model. She had this metal. It appeared to be armor from a samurai warrior all down her arm. And I said, what in the world is this? And I was able to make a phone call with the late Tom Tomasello from just off his living room. And next thing you know, we're on the line with Homer Kelly. That phone call, by the way, was taped and is now all over the internet.
Wow.
And that's where I came to understand hinge action. That set the sail. That would have been in the late fall of 70. That would have been 1980. That would have been the summer of 1980. Then in 1981, Tommy went out to see Homer Kelly in his first authorized instructor class. It's called a GSEB, Golf Stroke Engineering Bachelor. There were 3 in that class, and then there was one later on, late summer, early fall of that year. This is 1981, where he had 5 in there. And then I get a message from him, or a letter, and in the middle, I'm going to say probably October, November, would you like to come to the next class? Well, you bet. And so January of 82, I did go out, spend a week with Mr. Kelly along with 4 other wonderful teachers and players. And that week changed my life and a lot of other lives, as it turned out.
Wow. Yeah. It was a very interesting story when I was doing some of the research and background work, and I that caught my eye, and I thought, well, of course, that was instrumental in really, sort of relaunching your passion really for golf. I want to, before we talk about your certification program and how that all sort of works, I want to read out a few things that I snafu'd off your website. And this is just some of the great players. Just give the folks listening out there just some of the people that you've worked with and what they had to say. And I'm going to read the very first one here is, of course, a testimonial from Brian Gay, who most people know was on the PGA Tour champion in 2009, also Verizon Heritage Classic, 2009 St. Jude Classic. Yeah, exactly. And here's what he said. He said, I made the changes 3 years ago with Lynn Blake, and I haven't changed since. It was like starting over as a beginner with a clear mind. Hearing something from a young player like that, but certainly has paved a way on the tour, how does that make you feel working with somebody like that?
Well, first of all, I remember I was doing this part-time. I had 2 businesses I was running in the financial arena. And I came home in my pinstripes and parked my car in my garage, walked in the door, and my wife starts motioning me on the phone. She's got her phone, her hand held over the talking. See, at that time we didn't have cell phones, right? The talking end of the phone, whatever you call that, the talk end. And she said, It's Brian Gay. It's Brian Gay. No, she said, it's a tour player. I said, oh, I don't know. He sounded gay. Anyway, that's an inside joke for sure. I mean, nothing. But she didn't know.
Right.
But anyway, come on, no hate mail, please.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, but I get on the phone. Hello, okay, and it's Brian. I knew he had been prowling around my website for the last 3 or 4 months. I just didn't expect a call from him. He said, I'd like to work with you. I said, okay, well, that'd be great. I said, when? He says, tomorrow.
Wow.
I said, tomorrow? I said, you realize I live in Atlanta, you live in Florida, right? I mean, it's like 6 o'clock, 6:30 at night at that time. Well, 10 o'clock the next morning, I'm on the tee at Golden Bear Club in Keens Point, and that's where it started. Right. But you know what you mentioned, like starting over again, it kind of was for him because he had been in a ski accident in the winter.
Yeah.
He had fallen and fell on his ski pole, and it didn't puncture his skin, but it severely bruised his side, and he literally for a couple of months was not able to swing a club. So he had no choice except to go through what we call the basic motion curriculum, the 2 feet back, 2 feet through, and then halfway back, halfway through. He went down to Home Depot and bought may have been Kmart, and bought several these stand-up full-length mirrors, put them up in his bonus room, and he would practice these alignments that he was getting off my website. And then by the time I saw him, he already had the on-plane right forearm and this and that and the other, and away we went. But that was a very interesting call. And he said, you know what, Lynn, if I hadn't have been hurt, I'm not sure I would have had the discipline to stick with the small shots, the little shots, long enough to really get these principles.
Yeah, and that speaks volumes. I mean, it's nice when you can look back, and it doesn't really matter what level. I mean, it's obviously, when you have a tour player that speaks accolades of your work, that just sort of sweetens the pot. But I think really as somebody in the profession, I think when you work with a student or a group of students and you see that they're understanding what it is that you're trying to articulate to them, and they're getting the message, if you will, and then they're seeing results, I think there's nothing more satisfying really in golf, other than, I guess, winning the Masters yourself. But working with somebody like that and seeing that they're acknowledging the success and the abilities that you've sort of instilled in them, and then going out and putting it to work and obviously reaping the benefits of success. Let me read out another one here I want that caught my eye as well, and this is another testimonial.
Well, first of all, let me just comment there.
Sorry.
That's true, and sure, it's validation, and it's always good. I was outside the ropes for years. I mean, I was, and I'm still the biggest fan and always was. But to be inside the ropes, wow, that really was something else. I'll never forget that the AT&T Classic here about half a dozen years ago, I was walking off the practice tee, and you had between the practice tee and the clubhouse was the first tee, and you had to cross a little cart path to get there. And so I got to the crosswalk, and the marshal sticks his paddle up in the air and says, "Hold, please." Well, I stopped on a dime. He says, "That's for you, sir."
Wow.
Welcome to the PGA Tour. Anyway, fun and games. So, yes, that's satisfying, no doubt. But what's really satisfying, see, those guys can already do it. They kill for a quarter of a stroke around. That's what they're looking for. How do you get a guy a quarter of a stroke around? How do you take a guy from +4 to +6 and +6 to +8? That's kind of interesting, isn't it? Old joke. Yeah. Two guys in Manhattan going to the investment banking meeting, right? And it's really an important meeting. And the tires are spinning in the mud and the slush and the snow. And the guy gets out of the car, opens the trunk, gets out the silver urn, and starts sprinkling the ashes under the tire, saying, "Mother would understand."
Right.
Point is, tour players will do anything for a quarter of a stroke. How about taking a guy or a gal from Kent to Cannes? When they hit the first shot they've ever really hit in their life. That, to me, is far more rewarding than, watching the tour player do what already he can do better than anybody in the world.
Exactly.
And I got to say,
Lynn, let me ask you, as I said, we were going to talk about your certification program. Explain, for those that aren't familiar out there, what the Lynn Blake certification program is, how it works, and how you came about starting that.
Well, in a nutshell, I teach people the basic alignments that Homer Kelly taught me and continues to teach me through his great work, The Golfing Machine. There are three things to control. You got the club face, you got the club head. Those two are different. Mm-hmm. And you got the club shaft. And control of the club face is the flat left wrist, making one of three motions it can make to enable the club face to either close only, lay back only, or simultaneously close and lay back. And in the club head, which you drive through impact with lag pressure as opposed to throwing it away. By lag pressure, I simply mean pressure against the back of the shaft.
Right.
And then, of course, the club shaft, the straight line baseline of the inclined plane. And we have a technique we call tracing, where you're tracing with this lag pressure and the indispensable right forearm, down that straight line baseline. By the way, of all the changes we made 3 major ones with Brian, the number one thing, the thing that he thought was the most important, was the right forearm and its action through the ball. So I remember Mr. Kelly telling me, Lynn, you're going to want to ensure your right forearm and number 3 pressure point for $1 million. Well, he was wrong. For one and only time in his life, he was wrong. Yeah, how about $5 million? And in Brian's case, in 7 years, $13 million. Not to mention the outdoors income.
Wow, fantastic. So, how does the?
So that's what I do. So I teach. So we start with that. That's the basics. You got to control the club, face, head, and shaft.
Right.
From the address, what we call station 1, to the top, station 2 to the finish, station 3. So 3 functions of the club to control, and you use the flat left wrist, the lag pressure point, and the straight plane line, what we call the 3 imperatives, through the 3 stations, address, top, and finish. So the 3 imperatives controlling the 3 functions through the 3 stations. That is our triple triad, and you work on that for the rest of your life.
Wow. How does someone that's interested in wanting to become Lynn Blake certified, how do they enroll in the program?
Well, they need to contact me, Lynn, Lynn, at lynnblakegolf.com. Search me on the web, easy to find. And so just drop me an email. If you're a professional, drop me another email or PM text. I'll give you my phone, 770-527-3841. One more time, 770-527-3841. So email or text, and I will, if you're a professional, then I will admit you to our Lynn Blake Certified Forum, which is not exclusively Lynn Blake Certified Instructors. We have more than 1,000 members on that site right now. A handful of amateurs, carefully selected. I look at every single person. We could be far larger. But I want guys in there who, number one, act civilly,
right,
professional attitude, friends, helping friends in this business of golf instruction. So that would be the way. Contact me. There are 3 stages of the program. The first is the instructor level. That's a basic program. It's a 3-day program. I've got my next one coming up here March 23rd, 24th, 25th. That's a Monday through Wednesday here at my home club, Cuscowilla, the resort at Cuscowilla, Cuscowilla. It's halfway between Atlanta and Augusta, where they hold that little tournament every year.
Yep.
So it's about an hour and a half out of Atlanta. And once you get here, it is heaven. You've probably heard, people may not have heard of Cuscowilla, although it's number 1 ranked by Golf Week last year as number 1 best you can play in the state of Georgia. It's a Crenshaw core design. But they probably heard of Reynolds Plantation, which is 15 minutes away next door. It's the lake country, and it's wonderful. So that class is coming up March 23, 4, and 5. I may have one in the summer. We'll definitely have one in the fall. Then, of course, overseas, there's a good chance I'm in Europe and then back in again. I did a year or so ago a trip to Stockholm and Munich and London with a stopover in Austria. Certified 47 instructors. Well, 39 instructors and 8 amateurs. And then Seoul, South Korea, this last July, 16 instructors there, and a number of those folks have been to Cuscowilla since. I'm really proud of those people. So anyway, that's kind of where it is. We go to the instructor level, then we go to senior level, and then master level. And the master just requires a whole lot of understanding of what we're doing. They watch me teach. I've watched them teach. We spend a lot of time. Typically, they will have gone through level 1 3 or 4 times by that time.
Right.
And they're truly experts in the game. I'm so proud of them.
Well, fantastic. And this is something that you wanted to do, not just to help the average player out there become better, but this is something that you want to do to work with some of the instructors out there and really help them to be better instructors, correct?
Wanted to do is too generous. Driven to do. I have no idea why. You may recall the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, when Richard Dreyfuss is building this mountain in his living room. He loses his family, loses his business. But then he realized there was a reason for all this.
Right.
And that's kind of where I was. I have no business being here. I had a career. I had a life. But this is apparently where I was supposed to be all along. And finally, I showed up. So
well,
yeah,
certainly.
And the message too, as I say, I'm 68. I watched a TV program the other night. It says I have 10.8 years left. Well, that was kind of depressing. I hope I can outlive that. But I've set my watch. Anyway, the timer, right? But it does beg the question. What are you going to do here? As I say, I already had one career, and this one is now 11 years deep. If I give one lesson, I've helped one person, and maybe that one person can help his wife or her husband, and maybe the child, or maybe the buddy in the foursome. But that's a very limited group. But if I train one instructor, let's say like Jean-Juan Choi over in Seoul, South Korea, a wonderful young man, now LBC Lynn Blake certified master, and if he has, say, another 30 years, and he trains thousands of students and many instructor students. He's already doing that. He had Dr. Young-Hoo Kwan, that's a name familiar with a lot of your listeners, over this last winter to Seoul, South Korea, and produced the first golf biomechanics conference in Korea, with Dr. Kwan being obviously the presenter. Well, now what's the value of that? And if my students have that kind of influence, well, then you can put that on my tombstone, and I'll be a happy guy.
It's really about giving back in a lot of ways. I mean, as you said, you've had some great careers along the way, and this is really a way for you to give back with all the experience that you've accumulated over your life thus far. You're able to do something, as you said. I mean, you could go out and teach a student here or a student there, and that's fantastic. But what you're doing with your certification program with the different instructors and professionals that you're working with is you're really creating an opportunity for them to sort of pay it forward through their own efforts, but also through your program. And I think that's fantastic.
That's true, Ted, but, I'm not that altruistic. And it's giving me way too much credit. I get as much out of this as anybody, if not more.
Right.
I have over 10,000 posts on the subject of the golf machine on my website, Lynn Blake Golf, which lynnblakegolf.com, which I've spent very little time on the last couple of years as I've grown and grown and grown this work with instructors. And almost all my work here in the last couple of years has been on my certification, or the Lynn Blake Certified Closed Facebook group.
Right.
And I write every day on that, every day. Well, when I write a post, I learn as much as anybody. I guarantee you, I learn more every day. You write, yes, it's for others, but you write to learn. And you learn what you know, you learn what you don't know. I think it was Sir Francis Bacon that wrote centuries ago, he said, conversation makes the ready man. Okay, so now you can talk about it. Reading makes the ready man. Now you got something to talk about. Conversation makes now I'm getting my stuff mixed up. Makes the precise. Reading makes the ready man. Conversation makes the whatever the man, and then but writing makes the precise man. That's the thing.
Right.
When you put something down, that ink's hard to erase, particularly in cyberspace. You put it out there, it's up. So anyway, it's learn man, ready man, and precise man. Now I got it.
Right, and Lynn, one of the things too that you're so right. We should always be learning. When we come to a point where we feel we can't learn anymore, then there's a problem. And I'm the same as you in the sense that this is what I do with this program. I mean, I'm learning as much by having the different guests on. The group that was on before you that do the Coach's Corner panel. Every week that comes on. I did it last year and it was very successful. Had a lot of great feedback, and so I brought it back again for the first half of this year. And, this is what I do is, in addition to teaching golf, I learn from other professionals and other techniques, and I like to listen. And that's part of the reason why I do this show, is not just to help the average golfer out there, but to be able to use it as a way of exchanging information within the golf community.
Right.
And
that's
I think
really it was Mark Twain that said, we're all ignorant, just on different subjects.
Yeah.
And that's true. We just we can learn from everybody, and the guy that doesn't think he can, then he's got a different problem. That's called megalomania.
Yeah, I agree. Lynn, let me ask you something. While we're on obviously golf instruction, where do you see? I mean, you obviously we're down at the PGA show this year, and you see lots of things. And again, thank you. Let me say officially on air, thank you for the invite. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it down this year, and if the invite comes for next year, I will certainly take you up on that offer if it still holds. But when you were down there, you obviously got a chance to see not just the equipment and some of the new technology, but some of the different approaches, if you will, to instruction. Where do you see the future of golf instruction headed, in your opinion?
Well, right now it's very high tech, but where I see this is going to sound old-fashioned, where I see the real future is, particularly younger people coming into business, you must first learn the basics. Don't expect to write War and Peace when you don't know the ABCs. Yep. From the ABCs, we form words. From words, sentences. From sentences, paragraphs. From paragraphs, chapters. From chapters, books. So you got to start there. And I'm seeing a lot of people staring at numbers with their back to the student. Give me 2 more degrees down. Give me 8 more degrees. No, that's not the answer. There's still grip, stance, posture. There's still body, arms, and hands. And the machines don't solve the problems. And of course, everybody knows that. And I got tens of thousands. I got thousands of dollars. I got the sophisticated gear in my bay, but that is not the answer for the great majority of people who come to see you. And that would include the tour players. I don't think. Now others do differently, and I'd be the last one to try to dictate to anybody how they should approach teaching business.
Right.
But the numbers are numbers. They don't teach the student how to swing, and they certainly never hug their neck. So
no.
That's just so to know your craft. See, this is a craft. This is a craft we're at, and you have to know how to hammer a nail straight. You have to know how to saw a straight line. And until you can do that, you have no business trying to put finials on your desktop that you made out of rich rosewood mahogany.
Right. Exactly. And I agree with it. I've said that many times on the program over the last couple of years, particularly. As I said, I didn't make it down this year to the PGA show, but last year I was. And, certainly with some very impressive things that I saw, but there were also a lot of things I saw that I really wasn't all that impressed with. And I just felt, just exactly to your point, that it was sort of overcomplicating the process. I believe, as you do, I think, keeping it simple, I think letting people understand the basics of the golf swing, because really the numbers, in my opinion, are really more for the instructor to kind of gauge an idea and get an idea of some of the feedback. But I think one of the problems that's happened here lately in the last, I would even say 5 to 10 years, is some of the instructors are then taking that information and then passing it on to the students, and I think it actually overcomplicates the process. I think the students get confused, and I think they get bombarded with numbers and messages, and to the point where they actually get frustrated. So I'm like you. I think keeping it simple is a more effective way.
All right, so let's key off that, which is backtracking just a bit.
Sure.
Keeping it simple is not exactly the whole answer either.
No.
The problem with simple is it's incomplete often. You leave things out. Now, if you come to an instructor who keeps it simple and you've got the things that he or she is leaving out, well, that's just fine. But suppose you don't have the thing that he or she is leaving out. And suppose you come to a teacher who is teaching you how to swing the club, but you never swung the club in your life. You've always punched the club. You've driven the club. Yeah. Well, now that instructor's not going to work for you, and vice versa. If you're coming to a guy who's teaching right arm drive, and you're sitting there using a lot of body pivot and left arm and club throw out, those don't mix.
Right.
There's 24 components in this system I teach. You don't have to put them in; they're already there. When you came out of the womb, you had feet and knees and hips and shoulders, and you had hands. First time you picked up a club, you had a way to grip it and a way to take it back and a way to bring it down. So those are there. The only difference between the average player, the handicap player, and a tour player, other than experience, is more and more precision in the component relationships that make up the total motion of the stroke. And the instructor needs to be able to do that without a machine. That's the thing. So more and more precision in these 24 components. And what these 24 components do, and a knowledge of the way they work, it's not, and again, it's not one swing. If you have 24 components, which we do, and 144 cataloged variations, ways to do those same 24 things, Well, 144 ways to do 24 things. If you do the math, the permutations, and the combinations, you get about 10 trillion ways to get it right. So somewhere in there, there's a swing for you, for your students, and everybody else. So this is not a the way. It can be a my way, but not a the way, because there is no the way. What it allows, though, I mentioned these three things: tracing a straight line baseline with a flat left wrist and club head lag pressure. Control of the club. How you want to do that is your cup of tea. Yeah. But you do have to do that because these laws, the laws of force and motion that really have been around since the beginning of time, Isaac Newton codified them all back in the 16th century, so they've been around at least that long. They're the same laws as we use every day when we take a step, when we drink a glass of water. And by the way, in that glass of water, look at it, the bottle of water, let's just say there's a tide in there. And there's a low tide and a high tide. Well, you don't see that? Well, of course not. It's on that scale, but it's there. Yeah. Same thing with that golf ball. So impacts 3/4 of an inch, 4/10,000th of a second. It can really respond to these influences of a left wrist that lays back only or closes only or simultaneously closes and lay back. You bet it can. And if you're not delivering the right impulses, that golf ball, guess where it's going? Into the lake. Not because it's mad at you, but because it has to. Yep.
Well said, Lynn. It brings up an interesting point, though, Lynn. If you look at the tour players, let's talk about the tour player for a second today, and not anyone particular, but and you look at the tour players of, the Nicklaus and the Palmer and Trevino and some of those guys, and Trevino is probably the best example I can think of. Obviously, there's certain things that you have to do right in order to make good ball contact and get the results that you're looking for. But how you go about that. Now, if you look at today's tour player, which is very mechanized, very machine-looking, and very repeated-looking swing, and picture-perfect in some ways, and then you look at a player like Trevino, 20, 30 years ago when he was more in his prime, two different-looking swings, but yet getting equally good results. Why is there seem to be such, and I guess the question I'm looking for to get answered from you is, why is so many players in today's game looking for that picture perfect looking swing and yet still not getting necessarily the desired results? And the reason why I say that, they're hitting the ball straight, they're hitting it long and so forth, but they're not winning. What's the missing component?
Well, you asked about three questions in there.
I know. Well, I figured, we got time, so.
Well, let's just talk about pretty. And remember, as Forrest Gump said, Mama said, pretty is as pretty does. Okay? Yeah. Let's start with that, and there's a lot of truth in that. Thank goodness for mamas. But I would say probably there are more model swings being taught today. There's more understanding of the swing today, for sure, than there was. I like, when I was coming up, it was a day, I'm not going to mention the various methods that were out there, but we had no shortage of methods when I was coming up in the late 60s and 70s. And in fact, I had enough of a method, but one particular method, that by the time I was 35, I was a virtual cripple. I couldn't walk because I was putting myself in exactly the positions I was being told to do. Unfortunately, my body wasn't made to do that. So not only was the stroke far less efficient as it could have been, but I not only risked injury, I sustained injury. So fortunately, I'm by all that, given these, the mechanics that are teaching today. So, but John Jacobs, the great British teacher, said there was a wasteland in golf instruction, a wasteland, and it lasted about 20 years. Well, guess what? That's when I came up. So I could pound on the table. That's when I was getting started with a golfing machine. And, I believe in the humble approach. But I came out swinging because I really felt violated, that the expertise that I had leaned on wasn't right, and that's a shame. But neither here nor there. Mea culpa. I had the right to do it differently. Now, remember, back in those days, we didn't have the TV that much. I sound like I'm out of the out of the 18th century, but I'm not. We actually had cell phones. We had airplanes going up 35,000 feet that went 650 miles an hour. I mean, it was just yesterday, by the way. So all you guys think you got forever, look again. It's tomorrow. Anyway, so we got through that wasteland and now are much more conventional in terms of the way we see things today. Still some holes, but we're gradually filling them in. Okay, you asked about the winning. Well, okay, you do have to win, and obviously we all know that to win you have to learn to win. How you learn to win, you put yourself in the mix as many times as you can. Well, how do you do that? Now I had calls to mind two quotes. One from Bob Gardner, the great pole vaulter of years gone by, Olympic pole vaulter. He says, that's easy. All you got to do, pole vaulting's easy. All you got to do is get 16 feet in the air and then roll over the bar. Okie dokie. That's one aspect. And the other is a recipe for Scottish stew. Step one, rabbit stew. It's a Scottish recipe for rabbit stew. Step one, catch the rabbit.
Right.
So I understand that this idea of learning to win, first you got to be in a position to win. And that ain't all that easy, as the man said.
Right.
So, and what is that a product? A lot of hard work, a lot of dedication, a lot of belief, and ideally somebody on your team helping you see that this could be your time. Earn your spurs, wait your turn. Now's your time. As much as anything else, I think that's what I help my tour players and my other good players with. You've done the work. You've waited your turn. Now is the time. Not tomorrow. This is, I mentioned Brian, not to pound that table. And we haven't worked together in the last couple of years. We had 7 good years together, and I haven't been fired or officially retired, but whatever it is, we're not working. But I said, Brian, Hilton Head is your track. This is your major. Yep. It's not that long. You can dominate it. Yeah, people have said that before, but I never played. You can do this. So year after year, I kept pounding. This is your major. And when he finally did it, he shot 10 under. Excuse me. I mean, he set the course record, the tournament record, and won by 10. And there's a big lesson there. It's called self-image. That's part of this whole idea of winning. Bobby Jones, when he was a young teen, came to the 18th hole at his club, East Lake number 1, needing sometimes no better than double bogey to beat his personal best score of 74. For 2 years, he came to the 18th tee box and failed to do it. When he finally broke 74, so what his score was? 66. Wow. So he was ready to make 74 a long time before he broke 74. But that's that self-image. You can have the mechanics. The conscious mind trains the subconscious mind, just like we learned to type. You want to see a natural typist? Go into a typing room first day. Okay, guys, type away. At best, it's hunt and peck. Oh, no, you got to go faster. You know what you get? You get gibberish. Why? Untrained. Untrained fingers? No. Untrained mind. There was a great Canadian pianist, Glenn Gould, who, concert pianist, worldwide reputation for many years, and before one of his concerts, the media came to him and said, Glenn, we noticed you don't spend much time with the finger work around the piano. You spend all your time studying the score. He looked at him and said, the fingers have very little to do with playing the piano. So once you get the technique, once the conscious mind has trained the subconscious mind, then the real trick is getting the conscious mind out of the way. The subconscious mind has to be trained. It's ignorant, totally. But the conscious mind trains it. The conscious mind can only think of one thing. The subconscious mind, operating through feel, can think of many, many, many things. So basically it says under the gun, get out of my way, conscious mind. You trained me. Thank you very much. But now I can do it better than you. Watch me out. Boom.
Do you think, Lynn, that this is part...
So that's what it's got to do. The self-image has got to come along. You can't expect the self-image to do it all. You're standing in front of the mirror and saying to yourself 100 times every day, I'm a great putter, I'm a great putter, I'm a great putter. Well, that won't hurt. But that first 3 or 4 putter that you jerk left of the hole, it won't take 1 or 2 of those, and guess what? Somebody's not going to believe somebody. I love the quote from Jimmy DeMeritt years ago. You want to get confidence in putting? I'll tell you how to get confidence in putting. You get confidence in putting, picking the ball up out of the can. So first you got to have a technique that's going to put that ball in the hole. Then you become confident. It works in that order, not the other way around.
Is this why, I think I pretty much know the answer to this, but is this why it's so hard to find somebody of Nicklaus's caliber on the golf course today? I mean, Tiger was probably the closest thing we've seen in a long time. But, Nicklaus certainly, by his own admission, was certainly not the best ball striker. I mean, he had some length and he could certainly do a lot of things, but by today's standards, he was not one of the best ball strikers. but mentally there was nobody tougher in the game during his time. And Tiger, as I said, was the only one that's really come out. And some people feel that he surpassed Nicklaus in the mental side of the game. But is this why we're not seeing anybody really coming out and dominating in today's PGA Tour or even LPGA Tour?
Well, first of all, the Vardens, the Joneses, the Hogans and Sneeds, the Nicklauses, and the Woodses, they come along every now and then, generationally. It's like you mentioned Caliber, a guy, the circus owner, his human cannonball quit, and he went week after week without a human cannonball. And somebody asked me, "How come you don't have a human cannonball?" He said, "I can't find another man of his caliber." Sorry, a little interlude there. But the Nicklauses do not come along every day, and I have to take issue with you. He wasn't just sort of long. He was the longest driver of his day,
sure.
longest straightest driver. And I would say his ball striking stats would stack up with anybody. Jack had, where his failing was in the short game. Now he won 18 majors, but he finished second 19 times, many times by only one stroke. He had, by Paul Runyon's estimation, the great short game artist, back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, he was a 10 handicap. Now, later in his career, at the very late, the twilight, if you will, of his career, he hired Phil Rogers, who was a junior at La Jolla Country Club under Paul Runyon, and learned his techniques. He hired Nicklaus hired Rogers to teach him the short game and the techniques of Runyon, which he did. In a very candid interview with Golf Digest here a year and a half, 2 years ago, Nicklaus said, had I had the Runyon techniques, and he specifically identified him as that, had I had the Runyon techniques earlier in my career, my record would have been better. It was widely known on tour. The joke was, Nicklaus is the only guy out here who could hit his one iron inside his pitching wedge.
Jeez.
So he had a short game. And you know what his approach to the short game was? Well, I'll tell you what it was. Well, first of all, and I didn't realize this until that interview, he said, my teacher and I, Jack Grout, never worked in the short game. We only worked in the long game. Well, I didn't know that. Did you? I didn't.
No.
He said, as a consequence, I just kind of did the short game on my own, and here was my approach. I would hit every par 4 and 2, every par 5 and 2, and sink everything under 10 feet. That was my approach to the short game.
Wow.
Well, yeah, there you go. If you're doing that, you don't need much chipping, right, or pitching.
Right.
Anyway, but at least he was adequate. I remember Larry Ziegler, who was the longest driver on tour year after year, and they said, Larry, we noticed you're number 1 in length off the tee, but you're 143rd in greens hit. What's the problem? He says, I hit a lot of fat wedges. So Nicklaus hit a lot of fat wedges too. And when he finally lost the ability, his prodigious tee to green skills, and they were prodigious, Ted.
Yeah.
Then he had to put in the compensation. Runyon, the great short game was it. He didn't have the long game. He learned early on. His size and weight and ability to move fast, he couldn't do it. So he had to use the short game not as a defensive weapon, but as an offensive weapon. Not just to keep the scores from ballooning, but to beat par and to thoroughly demoralize his opponents.
Wow.
Runyon's two major championships, both these. Here's a guy who never hit the ball more than, by his estimation, he averaged 231 yards off the tee during his PGA Tour career. 231. You say, well, it was different in those days. They had wooden clubs and all the feathery balls and all that. No. Yeah, Sneed was out there at 280. And Jimmy Thompson was with him, and right behind them you had, and Hogan was there too. Hogan stayed on tour year after year, not because he was winning tournaments. He didn't win a tournament for 10 years. He stayed on tour by winning the long drive contest on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So anyway, there were the long guys were out there. Then you had the next rung down, which is your Ralph Gouldals and your Byron Nelsons and so forth. But he was a shorty, even by his standards. I mean, guys like Light Horse Harry Cooper out of New York. They were longer than him by 10 yards, and yet he won 27 times on the PGA Tour. He won 2 money titles. He won 2 major championships. And just to prove it wasn't all a fluke, at age 50 he wins the World Seniors and the PGA Seniors. And somewhere along there, somewhere between 40 and 50 sectional PGA events, that he did it from 100 yards in. So you build on your strengths. Work on your strengths. On this quest to the winner's circle, build on your strengths, yes, but work on those weaknesses. If you're a good driver of the ball, don't sit there pounding drivers all day. Get your butt into the short game area. That's where the money is anyway. Any tour player will tell you that. You know what they call the short game? Money. M-O-N-E-Y. Money.
Yeah, well said. Lynn, just in the last few moments here, we're just about out of time, but I want to give you an opportunity. What, with this final question, what's down the road for Lynn Blake? Retirement or forge ahead?
No, I don't think there's retire. I don't know that word. Maybe something different, certainly a different aspect. I think for me it's going to be, how do I leverage this even further? How do I get the word out to more people? Obviously, a book's in the works, more video, the Internet. If you can't get your word out in our time, you can't get it out. There's a good chance I would never have left the teaching business, again, which was a part-time endeavor. What I would do is I know we're short of time here, but I would give seminars in my local city, and I'd do them around the city. I'd advertise in the paper, do them around the city, fill the place with people, give my little song and dance, and then from there we would call them up and sign up for the school. And my schools, I didn't have any green grass, so we were all indoors in hotels with mirrors and stuff. And yet, out of that came club champions, flight winners, got handicaps cut in half. Danny Yates went to the quarterfinals of the United States Amateur, going through my class and calling me every week. So these are, like I was able, but that's a lot of work to get a class filled like that. And typically we'd have 20 in a class. With an Internet, it would have been far different, but there was no Internet. So I just couldn't ride both horses. I was working part-time, half days, right? 12 hours in the golf business and 12 hours in the other business. And something had to give, and what I had to give was the golf. So I took the needle out of my arm and walked away for 20 years.
Wow. Lynn, you mentioned you'd let slip out there about a book. Is that currently in the works, or is it almost done, or when do you feel that's...
No. It's in my head right now.
Oh, okay.
But I've done, well, again, I write every day. I write, easily 2,000 words a day on these other things. But I've worked hard to hone my writing skills, and it sounds stupid, at this advanced age, if you will. Although I feel 25, act 15. But there's ways. I'm excited about the language. I'm excited about how we can take this gobbledygook that we read so much of and present it simply in a way that here's the key, the way that the student can absorb and apply. Trust me, they are not interested in learning about radial deviation.
Right.
They are not interested in ulnar deviation. And they don't want to hear that one wrist is supinating while the other wrist is pronating. So they want to learn about turning, rolling, cock, and uncock. That works. It's worked for centuries. Why do we change it now? To be more professional? Give me a break.
Yeah.
Roll is one syllable, right? Four letters. Roll. Supinate.
Yeah.
It's 3 syllables, and it's a big fancy Latin word, and they don't know Latin words unless they're a doctor.
Right.
Why should I train them in golf's hard enough? Why should I train them in a whole other language when their language we've got is perfectly good? As long as we can agree on some certain things, like turn this to the right. When you wrist roll to the right, they're turning, and when they roll to the left, they're rolling. So turn to the right, roll to the left. We don't have to say one supination, the other pronation, the other one supination, the other one pronation. No. We just turn and roll. Simple as that.
Well said, my friend. Well, Lynn, hurry up and write that book, and when you've got it published or nearly published, I want you to come back on and share some of your thoughts with that as well. But I want to take this opportunity. Thank you very much for spending some time with me tonight. I wish we had more time. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Very interesting, and I know the listeners will certainly have enjoyed it as well. And Lynn, you have an open invitation to come back anytime and share some of your great passion and certainly some of your great skills. And I thank you very much for spending that time with us tonight. And just very quickly before we go, just let the listeners again know if they're interested in reaching out, the best way to get in touch with you.
Email Lynn, Lynn, at lynnblakegolf.com. And please don't leave out the word golf. People just put Lynn at Lynn Blake and say it's not reaching you. Let guy add in the golf. Lynn at lynnblakegolf.com. And once again, the phone, 770-527-3841. I can be reached by text on that as well.
Very good, sir. Lynn, thank you very much again for joining me here on Golf Talk Live. It's been a pleasure and an honor to have you on here, and I know the many thousands of people that you've worked with over the years, both in the professional level and even the amateur level, I know appreciate all the good hard work that you do, and you're certainly a definite asset to this game and just an asset in general. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ted. It's a joy. It's a joy.
All right. Well, you have a great weekend, Lynn, and thank you again, and I look forward to having you join us here again on Golf Talk Live.
Okie dokie. Good night.
All right, good night. That was my very special guest, Lynn Blake, founder and director of instruction at Lynn Blake Golf. And let me just also extend a very special thank you to the Coach's Corner panel tonight, John Hughes, Matthew Cook, and Tim Kramer. Guys, you did a fantastic job. Lynn, again, thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. What a true gentleman, and just an honor and privilege to have somebody of Lynn's caliber in this great profession that we all love so much. I want to say a special thank you, of course, to all of the listeners all around the world for faithfully tuning in each and every week to Golf Talk Live. I certainly have a pleasure and enjoyment of having a number of highly talented coaches, teaching professionals, authors, and, of course, entrepreneurs stop by the program and share their thoughts and input with the listeners and other professionals out there as well. I know they certainly enjoy tuning in, and it's really through their participation and guest appearances that have helped make Golf Talk Live a first-class show. Special thank you to some of the sponsors and supporters of the program, Mr. Jonathan Laird from South Coast Golf Guide. You've heard me mention several times. Go to www.southcoastgolfguide.com and check that out as well. Get a copy if you're in the area in the southeastern part of the United States, from Texas right over to the north tip of Florida. All the states in between, you can get a copy there, or you can go to southcoastgolfguide.com and ask for a copy there, and Jonathan will mail one out to you happily if you're not going to be in the area. A lot of great courses down in the southeastern part of the United States for you digging and shoveling out of the snow up there in the north. If you're looking for some great places to play, you're going to find them at South Coast Golf Guide. Also, thank you to Meredith Kirk. Been on the program a few times. She's the owner of Meredith Kirk Golf and the Junior Golf Exchange. You can get a hold of her at meredithkirk.com. Great lady. Had her on the show here a few weeks ago. Thanks, Meredith, for all the great work that you do. And she was also the 2014 Mrs. South Carolina. Wore that crown very honorably and did a great job in her year as the 2014 Mrs. South Carolina. Nikki and Tiffany Litherland, all your great support. My good buddy from down under who now lives here in the United States. He and his wife, Tiffany. And Nikki's going to be on the show here, where I'm going to reach out to him in the next little while and get him on the show. Great golfer and just a great professional as well. Thank you, Nikki and Tiffany, for all of your support. Mr. Bernie Pinder from Ontic Golf, thank you as well. Great custom line of putters. Go to onticgolf.com if you want to learn how to really get a hold of a great putter, customized putter by Bernie himself. Reach out to Bernie on onticgolf.com. Mr. Sean Kelly, owner of linkedgolfers.com, largest golfing community on LinkedIn. He's now brought that out of, still currently on LinkedIn, but he's also brought that community out to his own business. And as I said, he's the owner of linkedgolfers.com. Just a great man. A lot of very great talent in Sean Kelly, and just does a great job in bringing that golf community from all over the world on linkedgolfers.com. So make sure you check out that. And last but certainly not least, my very good friend, Mr. Peter Doyle from Doyle Golf Solutions over in Ireland. Big supporter of the program. Thank you, Peter, for all of your kind words. And I see that I'm being prompted here to end the show. So thank you again, everybody. Thank you to my guest this evening on Coach's Corner. I will be back here with another Coach's Corner next week and another great guest interview as well to follow. So I will see you back here next Thursday at 6 p.m. Central, right here on Golf Talk Live. God bless everybody and have a great weekend.